Thank you, everybody, for being here. D'ici la fin de l'année, on va investir 93 milliards en crédit d'impôt pour des investissements propres. Ça va créer des centaines de milliers de bons emplois pour les Canadiens dans les années qui viennent. Tax credits for clean tech adoption and manufacturing, hydrogen, electricity, and CCUS for companies and investors. And to get the full credit, employers must hire union workers or pay a prevailing union wage. This is huge, huge. This year's budget also expands the clean tech manufacturing tax credit to include critical minerals, and it creates a new stream for our growing EV supply chains. Honda's already taken us up on the offer, and they're announced last week that they are building 4 new EV plants in Ontario. So this budget really is about certainty for industry, for investors, and for workers. It is our plan to put workers at the center of our economic plan and to boost economic growth. We are updating the Impact Assessment Act to modernize and streamline the federal permitting process and to get major projects done faster and better. Upholding environmental standards, working closely with provinces and territories, and increasing Indigenous rights and participation, which I know Gary's going to speak to shortly. Industry needs to know when to build. They need to know that they have the confidence that they can build. And we can give them that confidence. As the chair of the Ministerial Working Group on Regulatory Efficiency in Clean Growth, it's a hell of a title. This is our objective. It is providing industry with that certainty. It is shortening timelines. It is cutting red tape. Look at the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Oil is flowing to Tidewater as I speak. About 40,000 construction jobs, over 3,600 of those jobs Indigenous, with 26,800 person years of employment to follow. TMX will add 1/4 of a percentage point to our GDP in this quarter alone from one project. That is economic growth. And at Dow Chemicals, $11.5 billion carbon-neutral ethylene cracker plant in Alberta, $400 million coming from ITCs. 7,000 workers on site in Alberta at the peak of construction, 500 full-time operators. Look at World Energy GH2 in Newfoundland and Labrador. I was just at their headquarters last week. On their wind to hydrogen project, 2,200 construction jobs, 400 for operation. We can get big things built in this country. We can give industry and investors the confidence that they need to get us there. And we can create the good, well-paying jobs that make it possible. Over to my friend Gary.
Thank you very much, Seamus, and glad to be here on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. I just came from a meeting of the Intergovernmental Leaders Forum. It's a meeting that happens once a year with the Prime Minister, as well as modern treaty and self-governing nations heads. It's one of the major meetings that we have each year where we set mutual priorities and ensure that we continue on the path towards reconciliation and self-determination and self-government. There's so much work being done at these meetings, and one of the major drivers of this forum is economic reconciliation. Through modern treaties that affirm that their rights over lands, resources, working together to enable growth at a structural level, and through the new $5 billion loan guarantee. The loan guarantee in the Budget Implementation Act is an important reason why opposition parties need to work to pass this bill without delay. It makes good sense for long-term growth of Indigenous communities, many of whom have limited options to receive financing due to the confines of the Indian Act. This is a transformative investment that will benefit good projects. For example, in British Columbia, there's the Tudeka geothermal project, Canada's only 100% owned, Indigenous-owned and led geothermal project that is repurposing old gas wells into geothermal wells to generate clean electricity. In Nova Scotia, Everwind Fuels is moving ahead with North America's most advanced hydrogen project, with 3 First Nations equity and development partners. We received feedback from Indigenous partners, and now we're delivering solutions. We received feedback because we met with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and we listened to them. We listened to their concerns about lack of access to capital. It was not that long ago that Indigenous people did not have a partner in the federal government, just 8.5 years to be precise. We're moving forward on a number of initiatives, including in this BIA, support for the Red Dress Alert pilot. Pierre Poilievre had the opportunity to make the right decision here, but when a loan guarantee was floated in the fall economic statement, he voted against it. It's clear that this bill, this Budget Implementation Act, is a critical component of our path towards reconciliation, and I urge everyone to support this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here. Bonjour tout le monde. It's great to be joined with my colleagues, Minister O'Regan and Minister Anandasangaree, today to continue to talk about Budget 2024. As my colleagues have said, our budget is about creating a system, a country that is fair for every generation. I have 2 kids, Kyle and Cassidy, and my biggest hope for them in life is to create a world where they can succeed more, face less challenges, and better than my parents or even my generation did. Part of that is giving them or giving everyone a chance to start their dream business and build their future. As a former small business entrepreneur myself, I know it's never been easy to start a business, but it's so important that we help and make it easy and possible for small businesses and to create an environment where they can grow and thrive and reach their full potential. And that's what our budget does. It lays out our plan to keep our commitment to launch our new Canada carbon rebates for small businesses. This means over $2.5 billion that will be returning directly to small businesses. That's 600,000 small and medium-sized businesses across Canada. To receive this rebate, all eligible businesses all they have to do is file their taxes by July 15 of this year, and the CRA will automatically assess them and send a check. We are working hard with CRA to get this set up quickly and so that they can be delivered by the end of the year. And then going forward, every year, eligible businesses will receive a check after they file their taxes. C'est une excellente nouvelle pour les petites entreprises canadiennes. But it is not all we are doing. We're also helping boost startups with a $200 million increase over 2 years to increase our investments in venture capital and empowering young entrepreneurs by investing $60 million over 5 years for Futurepreneur Canada to support over 6,000 businesses. I started my entrepreneurial venture in my mid-30s with lots of responsibilities and kids, and what I'm trying to do is really encourage and empower young people to see entrepreneurship as a viable option. So these investments will continue to help entrepreneurs do just that. Notre budget est un plan visant à uniformiser les règles de jeu pour tous les entrepreneurs. It builds on the work we've been doing since 2015 to create millions of jobs for Canadians and create first-of-their-kind programs for entrepreneurs from all walks of life. It's a shame that the opposition, specifically the Conservative Party, and their leader would prefer to play games than to join us in this effort. He's already said he's going to vote against this budget, a vote against creating a Canada that is for all generation. And we all saw this shameful behavior in the House this Tuesday, when instead of debating on budget and ensuring the crucial supports like $2.5 billion in rebates go back to businesses, he decided that he would throw a temper tantrum and get himself kicked out of the House. He claims he's being silenced, but the only thing he is silent on is denouncing extremists. This is not the behavior of a serious politician who cares for Canadians. And this isn't, at least now, this is not the time. And he's done this and voted against crucial supports that we've put in place for businesses time and time again. Pierre doesn't care, and Canadians deserve better. So while the Conservatives would prefer to come up with slogans instead of any plans whatsoever, we need to continue to invest in Canadians for every generation, and that's what our government is doing. So whether success is finally being able to open your small business that you've been dreaming about or turning the key on your first home, our government is really here to help make it a reality for Canadians, because that is what Canadians have earned and that is what Canadians deserve. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. O'Regan about C-58. As you know, it applies to federally regulated workplaces, but doesn't apply to the federal public service. There's a block amendment at committee today that would have extended it to the federal public service, but it requires amending a different piece of legislation, the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations Act. Would you be open to adding similar anti-SCAB provisions to that act so that the anti-SCAB kind of rule also applies to the federal public service?
As far as I know, for the public service, that something similar already exists. It's outside my purview, so I'm not going to really just spin off about it. This is really important for the private sector. It's really important for supply chains. I think it's really important ultimately for stability in the supply chains, particularly the maintenance of activities portion of it. 58. The fact that it's gone through committee now. There has been some amendments that we have entertained. I know that one we had heard this from our NDP partners. They've been very public about it, but also from some unions as well. Was moving the implementation date from 18 months after royal assent to 12 months. So basically, we went back to the Canada Industrial Review Board and said, look, because that's always been my line, like, can you do that? And when they had come to me and said, we need 18 months. Like, if we go ahead, when we go ahead with a replacement worker ban, it's got to work, right? We can't gum up the works if we have the CIRB, which is really kind of adjudicating this. If they're gummed up, if they're backlogged, and if they need to be at their best. They are some of the best in the world at this. I want to maintain that standard, that level of success. I got to make sure that I got enough people there, and we got to make sure that those people who are there are well trained in this. This is the most fundamental change to collective bargaining in federally regulated sectors in Canadian history. So you can't just expect these negotiators who know these tables and those rules so well to be able to flip it out overnight. Like, they can't. So, but they have said, we think we can do it in 12 months. I take them at their word, as I did before. So now we're able to move from 18 to 12.
I was also hoping to ask you about the Teamsters vote that sets the stage for CPCN workers to be on strike as soon as May 22nd. I know federal conciliators have been on the case for weeks
Constantly.
at this point.
Months.
Is there anything else that the federal
Years,
government can do to prevent this from deteriorating to a massive strike?
Yeah, I mean, we got to make sure. Anybody who saw how I worked in Vancouver last year on the West Coast, I think has a clear idea that I am serious when I say that the best deals are made at the table. They have to be made at the table. They have to be made between those unions and those employers. And I would say the same here. And I would also take note of the fact that during those 2 weeks too long, and we've got an industrial inquiry commission that we've started on that to make sure that that doesn't happen again. I'm not happy with just the deal. I want to know fundamentally how we prevent that from ever happening again. But you'll note that during those 2 full weeks, not one party in the House of Commons asked for back-to-work legislation. So if anybody's thinking that there's back-to-work legislation coming, there was no party in those full 2 weeks in the House of Commons that asked for back-to-work legislation. So take that table seriously. Take it seriously now. Get a deal. I am not one of these ones who considers drama part of the process. It puts me in the minority for people who are familiar with collective bargaining. I don't know, maybe it's my anxiety level. I don't need it. I don't think Canadians need it. I don't think business needs it. I don't think workers need it. If you see the deal, get the deal. If you got to work to get to the deal, then work to get to the deal. Deadlines have a purpose. They focus the mind. They allow people to compromise. I get it. I'm not naive. But the less drama, the better. Get the deal done at the table.
Guys, one more, is that right? I also just wanted to ask about that impossibly titled ministerial working group that you're the chair of. I understand that you guys were kind of leading the charge.
Obscurity is power in Ottawa.
I understand you guys were kind of leading the charge on changing the IAA and bringing forward those amendments. What's kind of the focus of that ministerial group moving forward now that those changes have been officially proposed?
I think I'll leave that to those particularly. I'll leave to Ministers Wilkinson and Guilbeault. But certainly that is part of a whole bunch of things that we are looking at. We got to make sure that the IAA is improved. Then in the middle of that mandate, we got the decision rendered. from the court. So, you know, that gives us, in some ways, an opportunity to make sure that we get it right and that we, you know, abide by the court's ruling, right? With some of that having to do with knowing your jurisdiction and knowing which lane to stay in. So we will certainly be abiding by that. But you know what? It's not, one of the things that we learned during this process and we will continue to work with is it's not so much environmental assessments that gum up the work sometimes, it's permitting. It's departments working together. It's provinces and territories working with the federal government. You know, BC has kind of a gold standard on environmental assessments in which, you know, we just kind of look at them and say, if you tweak this and do that, we only need to have one. We've also done this in Newfoundland and Labrador too, where we said, you know, to the province on offshore wind, where it happens in what we, you know, in certain bays around my province, around the island. Look, if you're working within there, yeah, we've looked at your provincial environmental assessment. It works fine. Why double it up? It just doesn't make any sense. And you know, we've been working with Minister Anandasangaree's department too, and Minister Haidu's departments on, you know, how do we make it easier for Indigenous, for First Nations, Métis, Inuit communities to participate? Some of them are just fatigued by assessments and consultations. And I know, you know, growing up in Labrador and having to deal with a number of nations there, you know, you've got people who are managing communities of only a few hundred people who are just being deluged while they try to keep their communities going and tackling everything else, dealing with all of this. How can we make things easier for them? So we're looking at all sorts of ways that I think are just very common sense in order to make sure that things get built, you know. But I would point out TMX. I mean, it's happening now, regardless, you know, and I know for some it's controversial, but it got built. It is built now. It is happening. And when you go through some of the numbers, 639 river crossings, 199 highway crossings, 100 kilometers of urban pipeline going right through Vancouver, 9 golf courses. You can't disturb golf courses. But more importantly, 27,900 bird nests. And I'm very proud of 255,000 First Nation artifacts moved, working with First Nations. This is how you get things done. It does take a bit of time, you know, in order to do this right, to work with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, but you got to do it. You got to do it. And we can't anyway sacrifice environmental integrity, but there's lots of other ways in which we can ensure that we maintain that oversight and get rid of red tape. A lot of that falls back on us and other governments. We can get through that. Okay.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, everyone.